Marcus Chen had always been good at blending into the background. At 28, he possessed the kind of unremarkable appearance that made people's eyes slide right past him in crowded rooms. Average height, dark hair kept in a regulation cut, and a face that seemed perpetually serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. His colleagues at the Pentagon often forgot he was there, which suited him perfectly fine. What they didn't know was that Marcus held one of the highest security clearances in the United States military, despite never having set foot in boot camp. While others saw a quiet desk clerk who organized files and fetched coffee, Marcus was actually a civilian intelligence analyst whose work directly influenced national security decisions at the highest levels. The misunderstanding had started 3 years ago when he was first assigned to work alongside Navy SEAL Team 6. The introduction had been deliberately vague for security reasons. Captain Rodriguez had simply announced that Marcus would be providing support to the team's operations. The SEALs, being pragmatic men of action, immediately assumed he was some kind of administrative aide or logistics coordinator. Marcus never corrected their assumption. His real job required him to maintain a low profile, and the SEALs' misconception provided perfect cover. While they discussed their missions around him, treating him as invisible furniture, he gathered intelligence that helped shape their operations from behind the scenes. Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan was the team's leader, a towering man with steel gray eyes and hands scarred from countless missions. He had a reputation for being tough but fair, and his men would follow him into hell without question. Sullivan treated Marcus with the kind of distant politeness reserved for necessary but unimportant personnel. "Chen, make sure those supply reports are filed by 1400, Sullivan would say, barely glancing in his direction. "And see if you can get someone to fix the coffee machine. It's been making that weird noise again." Marcus would nod quietly and go about his actual work, which involved analyzing satellite intelligence, decrypting enemy communications, and coordinating with assets across 3 continents. The irony wasn't lost on him that while Sullivan was ordering him to fix coffee machines, Marcus had probably saved the commander's life at least twice through intelligence warnings he'd passed along through proper channels. The team consisted of 8 highly trained operatives, each specializing in different aspects of special operations. There was Petty Officer Rodriguez, an explosives expert who could disarm a bomb with his eyes closed. Chief Martinez handled communications and electronic warfare. Petty Officer Thompson was their sniper, capable of making impossible shots from distances that defied belief. Each man was a weapon honed to perfection, and they knew it. Their base of operations was a nondescript building in Norfolk, Virginia, that looked like any other military administrative facility from the outside. Inside, it housed some of the most advanced tactical equipment in the world. The briefing room where Marcus spent most of his time was lined with monitors displaying real-time intelligence feeds from around the globe. During mission briefings, Marcus would sit in the back corner, ostensibly taking notes on administrative matters. In reality, he was often the one who had provided the intelligence that made the briefings possible. He had contacts in the CIA, NSA, and foreign intelligence services that the SEALs couldn't even imagine. His network of informants spanned from the streets of Kabul to the corporate boardrooms of Beijing. The most recent mission had involved a terrorist cell operating out of Eastern Europe. While the SEALs were being briefed on their insertion points and extraction routes, Marcus had already spent weeks cultivating a source within the organization who would provide real-time updates on the terrorists' movements. The mission's success would depend as much on his intelligence work as on their tactical skills. But the SEALs saw none of this. To them, he was just Chen, the quiet guy who organized their paperwork and occasionally brought them coffee. They would joke among themselves about how he probably couldn't do a single push-up or fire a weapon without falling over. The jokes weren't mean-spirited, but they reflected their complete misunderstanding of who he really was. Marcus had tried to correct the misconception once, early in his assignment. He had casually mentioned his security clearance level during a conversation about operational security. Sullivan had laughed and patted him on the shoulder. "That's cute, Chen. I'm sure your clearance is very important for filing those supply requisitions." The dismissal had been so complete that Marcus decided it wasn't worth the effort to explain further. His real supervisor was Admiral Patricia Hawthorne, a brilliant strategist who had climbed the ranks through a combination of tactical genius and political acumen. She was one of the few people who knew Marcus's true role and the scope of his contributions to military operations. Their meetings took place in secure facilities, usually late at night to maintain the fiction of his lower status. The intelligence you provided on the weapons shipment probably prevented a major terrorist attack in Frankfurt, Admiral Hawthorne had told him during their last meeting. The German authorities were able to intercept the cargo based on your source's information. The president personally thanked me for our contribution, though of course I couldn't tell him it came from someone the SEALs think is a filing clerk. Marcus appreciated the recognition, but he was more concerned with the job itself. Each piece of intelligence he gathered, each source he cultivated, each enemy communication he decrypted potentially saved lives. The work was its own reward, regardless of whether anyone understood what he actually did. The base had a small cafeteria where the team ate their meals together. Marcus usually sat alone at a corner table, reading intelligence reports disguised as administrative documents. The SEALs would sit together, discussing everything from mission tactics to weekend plans. Their conversation was peppered with military jargon and references to operations Marcus had helped plan but could never acknowledge. Sometimes civilian contractors or visiting officers would join them for meals. These visitors often made assumptions about Marcus based on his apparent low status among the group. He had overheard more than one conversation where visiting personnel dismissed him as just an aide or that clerk who hangs around the SEALs. The misconceptions extended beyond the immediate team. Other military units that worked with SEAL Team 6 often treated Marcus as an afterthought. During joint operations briefings, he would be seated with other administrative staff while the actual decision-makers discussed strategy. What they didn't realize was that many of their strategic decisions were based on intelligence Marcus had provided through back channels. One particularly embarrassing incident had occurred during a joint exercise with Marines from Camp Lejeune. A Marine colonel had literally handed Marcus a stack of papers to copy, assuming he was some kind of secretary. Marcus had politely taken the papers and made the copies, all while carrying encrypted communications from 3 different intelligence agencies in his jacket pocket. The charade had become so natural that Marcus sometimes forgot how unusual his situation was. He had developed a professional relationship with the real administrative staff, who treated him as a peer. They would complain to him about their workloads and ask his advice on dealing with difficult officers. He became genuinely helpful with actual administrative tasks, partly to maintain his cover and partly because he genuinely liked helping people. His apartment off base was spartanly furnished but equipped with sophisticated communication equipment hidden behind false walls. He could communicate with intelligence assets worldwide from what appeared to be a simple home office. His neighbors thought he was a mid-level government employee who worked regular hours and kept to himself. The contrast between his public persona and private reality sometimes felt surreal. He would spend his morning decrypting terrorist communications that could prevent international incidents, then spend his afternoon being asked to schedule appointments and organize filing systems. The cognitive dissonance was occasionally overwhelming, but he had learned to compartmentalize effectively. His family back in California had no idea what he really did for a living. His parents thought he was a military secretary, a job they viewed as safe and stable if not particularly exciting. His younger sister would tease him about his boring government job when he visited home. He would smile and let her believe whatever made her comfortable. The approaching mission to Romania would test his abilities more than any previous operation. His sources had indicated that a major arms dealer was planning to sell advanced weaponry to multiple terrorist organizations. The intelligence was time-sensitive and potentially game-changing, but he had to find a way to get it to the right people without revealing his true role. As he prepared for another day of being overlooked and underestimated, Marcus reminded himself that anonymity was his greatest asset. In a world where everyone wanted recognition and glory, his willingness to remain invisible made him invaluable. The SEALs would never know that their quiet aide was actually their most important asset, and that was exactly how it needed to be. The morning briefing would begin in 30 minutes, and Marcus knew it would be another day of careful balance between his public role and private reality. He gathered his files, adjusted his glasses, and prepared to once again become invisible in plain sight. The mission ahead would challenge everything he had built over the past 3 years, but he was ready for whatever came next. The mission to Romania had started like any other. Marcus sat in his usual corner during the briefing, apparently taking notes on supply inventories while actually memorizing every detail of the operation. The target was Viktor Kozlov, a Russian arms dealer who had been selling military-grade weapons to terrorist organizations across Europe. Intelligence suggested he was planning his largest deal yet, one that could put devastating firepower into the hands of groups planning attacks on NATO allies. What the briefing didn't include was the crucial intelligence Marcus had spent months developing. His source inside Kozlov's organization, a financial analyst named Elena Vesquez who had grown disillusioned with her employer's business, had been feeding him detailed information about the dealer's operations. Elena didn't know who she was really working for, believing Marcus to be a journalist investigating international arms trafficking. Through Elena, Marcus had learned that Kozlov wasn't just selling weapons. He was also trafficking classified military technology stolen from American defense contractors. The scope of the operation was far larger than anyone suspected, and the Romanian meeting was actually a cover for something much more significant. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan outlined the mission parameters with his usual precision. Intelligence indicates Kozlov will be meeting with potential buyers at a warehouse complex outside Bucharest. Our objective is surveillance and intelligence gathering. We go in quiet, document the meeting, identify the buyers, and get out clean. Marcus knew the mission was more complicated than Sullivan realized. According to Elena's latest communication, Kozlov had moved the meeting to a different location and increased security significantly. He had also invited buyers from organizations that weren't on any American intelligence watch lists, groups so new or so secretive that even the CIA didn't know they existed. The team would need this information to complete their mission successfully, but Marcus couldn't simply volunteer it without explaining how he knew. Instead, he had spent the previous week carefully planting clues through official channels, hoping the updated intelligence would reach Sullivan through normal briefing procedures. Unfortunately, the information was too sensitive and too recent to make it through the standard intelligence pipeline in time. As the team prepared for departure, Marcus made a decision that went against every protocol he had been taught. He approached Chief Martinez, the team's communications specialist, with what appeared to be a routine administrative question. Chief Martinez, I need to verify some equipment serial numbers for the inventory report. Could you show me the frequency settings on the new radio equipment? Martinez, always patient with administrative requests, walked Marcus through the radio specifications. As he did, Marcus quickly memorized the frequencies and encryption protocols. If the mission went sideways, he would be able to communicate with the team directly rather than routing information through official channels. The flight to Romania took place on a military transport that also carried supplies and personnel for the American embassy in Bucharest. Marcus traveled with his usual cover story of managing logistics for the operation. The SEALs treated the flight like any other mission transport, reviewing their gear and discussing contingencies. During the flight, Marcus received an encrypted message on his secure phone disguised as a text about supply shipments. Elena's latest intelligence was alarming. Kozlov had discovered there might be American surveillance of his operation and had set up counter-surveillance measures. Worse, he had hired mercenaries with military training to provide security for the meeting. Marcus spent the remainder of the flight trying to figure out how to get this critical information to Sullivan without blowing his cover. The team was walking into a trap, but any warning he could provide would raise questions about how he knew details that weren't in any official briefing. The team's base of operations in Bucharest was a safe house run by CIA assets, a nondescript apartment building that provided excellent cover and security. Marcus was assigned a small room that the team assumed would be used for administrative work. In reality, he immediately began setting up a sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation using equipment he had smuggled in among his office supplies. Sullivan called a final briefing for that evening, reviewing the operational plan one more time. The warehouse surveillance would begin at dawn, with the team positioning themselves around the target location to observe and document the meeting. Everything depended on staying invisible and avoiding contact with Kozlov's security. Marcus knew they couldn't avoid contact because Kozlov's security would be actively looking for surveillance. He had positioned counter-surveillance teams around the entire area, and they had equipment that could detect the kind of observation posts Sullivan was planning to use. As the team settled in for the night, Marcus made another crucial decision. He sent an encrypted message to Elena, asking her to create a distraction that would draw some of Kozlov's security away from the warehouse. The message appeared to be from a journalist colleague asking for additional information about Kozlov's business practices. Elena's response was immediate and concerning. She had discovered that Kozlov wasn't just selling weapons to terrorists. He was also planning to sell them intelligence about American military operations, including detailed information about SEAL Team 6 capabilities and methods. The Romanian meeting was a trap designed to capture American Special Operations personnel for interrogation. Marcus stared at the message in his darkened room, realizing that everything had changed. This wasn't a surveillance mission anymore. It was a rescue operation that hadn't started yet, and he was the only one who knew it. He spent the next 2 hours developing a plan that would save his team without revealing his true identity. Using his knowledge of Romanian geography and Elena's intelligence about Kozlov's operation, he identified 3 possible escape routes and 2 alternate communication channels that the team could use if their mission was compromised. At 3 in the morning, Marcus made what he knew was probably a career-ending decision. He woke Chief Martinez and told him there was an urgent communication from Base Command. When Martinez checked the radio, he found a message that Marcus had composed using proper military protocols and encryption. The message, which appeared to come from Admiral Hawthorne's office, contained updated intelligence about the Romanian operation. It warned that the target had counter-surveillance capabilities and recommended postponing the mission until better intelligence was available. The message also provided alternate observation points that would be safer for the team. Marcus had carefully worded the message to include information that could plausibly have come from other intelligence sources, avoiding any details that only Elena could have provided. Martinez woke Sullivan immediately, and the team spent the early morning hours revising their operational plan based on the new intelligence. The revised plan called for more distant observation posts and passive surveillance techniques that would be harder for Kozlov's people to detect. Sullivan was clearly frustrated by the change but recognized the value of the warning. "Somebody's looking out for us," he told the team. "Let's make sure we don't waste their effort." Marcus spent that morning in an agony of tension, monitoring multiple communication channels while maintaining his cover as an administrative aide. Elena sent periodic updates about Kozlov's preparations, each one more concerning than the last. The arms dealer had brought nearly 20 mercenaries to provide security, and they were equipped with military-grade surveillance equipment and weapons. Through his own intelligence network, Marcus confirmed that Kozlov had indeed acquired detailed information about American special operations techniques. The meeting in Bucharest was designed to demonstrate this knowledge to potential buyers, using captured American personnel as proof of the intelligence's value. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Marcus. Here he was, probably the most valuable intelligence asset the American military had in Europe, pretending to be a filing clerk while trying to save a team of elite soldiers who thought he was too weak to be useful in combat. As the team moved into position for their observation mission, Marcus established his own surveillance operation from the safe house. Using equipment that was far more sophisticated than anything the SEALs carried, he was able to monitor not just the target warehouse but the entire surrounding area. He could see Kozlov's counter-surveillance teams, track their movement patterns, and identify their communication frequencies. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. Kozlov had positioned teams to capture anyone attempting surveillance of the warehouse. The meeting itself was real, but it was also bait in a trap designed specifically for American Special Operations Forces. Marcus made his final decision of the day, one that would change everything about his carefully maintained cover. He activated the secure communication frequencies he had memorized during his conversation with Chief Martinez and sent a direct warning to the team in the field. The message was brief and encrypted: multiple hostile surveillance teams detected. Your position is compromised. Recommend immediate extraction via Route Charlie. Route Charlie was one of the escape routes he had identified, a path that would take the team away from Kozlov's counter-surveillance net and back to safety. The message would obviously raise questions about who had sent it and how they had acquired both the team's communication frequencies and detailed knowledge of their operational area. Marcus sat in his darkened room, listening to the team's radio traffic as they processed his warning and began their withdrawal. He knew that his 3-year career as an invisible intelligence asset was probably over, but he also knew that 8 of America's most elite warriors would live to fight another day. Tomorrow would bring questions he couldn't answer without revealing everything, but tonight his team was safe. For Marcus Chen, that was worth whatever consequences might follow. The aftermath of the Romanian operation brought questions that Marcus had been dreading for 3 years. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan stood in the secure communications room of their Bucharest safe house, holding a printout of the warning message that had saved his team from Kozlov's trap. His steel-gray eyes moved between the paper and Marcus's face with growing suspicion. "Chen, I need you to explain something to me," Sullivan said, his voice carrying the controlled tension of a man who had realized he might have been very wrong about something important. "This message came through on a frequency that only my team members should know. It contained tactical information that wasn't in any of our briefings. And it probably saved 8 lives last night." Marcus sat quietly at the small desk where he had been pretending to organize supply reports. Around the room, the rest of the team watched with curious expressions. They had all heard Sullivan's questions, and, for the first time in 3 years, they were really looking at Marcus instead of looking past him. "I received the message and passed it along, sir," Marcus said carefully. "It came through normal administrative channels." Chief Martinez stepped forward, holding his own communication device. "No, it didn't. I checked every frequency we monitor. This message bypassed all normal channels and came directly through our tactical communication system. Someone with significant technical knowledge and high-level access codes sent this." The room fell silent except for the hum of electronic equipment. Marcus realized that his careful 3-year charade was unraveling, and there was no way to put it back together. The intelligence that had saved the team could only have come from sources that a simple administrative aide shouldn't have access to. Petty Officer Rodriguez, the explosives expert, spoke up with characteristic directness. "Chen, either you're the luckiest file clerk in military history, or there's something about you we don't know. That message contained information about enemy positions that we couldn't see from our observation posts. How did you know Kozlov had counter-surveillance teams positioned exactly where the message said they were?" Marcus looked around the room at 8 faces that had treated him as invisible for 3 years. These men had shared meals with him, joked around him, and dismissed him as harmless background noise. Now they were studying him with the focused attention they usually reserved for serious threats or valuable assets. Before he could formulate an answer that wouldn't compromise his cover completely, Sullivan's secure phone buzzed with an incoming encrypted call. The commander answered with his usual crisp professionalism, then, his expression changed dramatically. "Yes, Admiral. We're all here. The operation was successful thanks to the intelligence warning you mentioned." Sullivan's eyes never left Marcus as he spoke. "I understand. Yes, ma'am. We'll be ready for transport in 2 hours." He ended the call and stood silent for a long moment, processing whatever he had been told. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of incredulity that Marcus had never heard from him before. "That was Admiral Hawthorne. She's flying here personally to debrief us on the Romanian operation. She specifically requested that all team members be present, including you, Chen. She also mentioned that we might have been operating under some significant misunderstandings about the nature of our team composition. The flight back to Norfolk on the Admiral's private aircraft was unlike any military transport Marcus had ever experienced. Instead of being seated with other support personnel, he found himself in the main cabin with Sullivan and his team, facing Admiral Patricia Hawthorne across a conference table equipped with secure communication systems. Admiral Hawthorne was a woman whose presence filled any room she entered. At 55, she had spent 30 years climbing through military ranks that had not historically welcomed women, particularly those who insisted on speaking their minds about strategy and tactics. Her silver hair was pulled back in a regulation style, but her dark eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had outmaneuvered opponents in boardrooms and battle situations alike. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the authority that had made her one of the most respected strategists in the military, "I believe it's time for some long overdue introductions. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan, What did your briefing materials tell you about Mr. Chen's role with your team? Sullivan glanced at Marcus before answering. Administrative support, ma'am. Logistics coordination and clerical assistance for our operations. Admiral Hawthorne nodded slowly. And, based on that understanding, how would you assess his performance over the past 3 years? Adequate, ma'am, Sullivan replied honestly. He's been reliable for routine tasks, though not particularly initiative-driven. Yesterday's communication was the first time he showed any real value to our operations. I see. The Admiral's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught a glint in her eyes that suggested she was enjoying this conversation more than she was letting on. Mr. Chen, would you like to correct Commander Sullivan's assessment, or shall I? Marcus felt the weight of 8 pairs of eyes focused on him with unprecedented intensity. After 3 years of careful invisibility, being the center of attention felt surreal. He removed his wire-rimmed glasses and cleaned them slowly, buying time to consider how much truth to reveal. Admiral, I think the team's assessment of my administrative capabilities has been fair, he said carefully. Though perhaps incomplete. Chief Martinez leaned forward in his seat. Incomplete how? Admiral Hawthorne answered before Marcus could respond. Marcus Chen holds a doctoral degree in international relations from Georgetown University, with specializations in Eastern European politics and intelligence analysis. He speaks 6 languages fluently and reads 3 others well enough for intelligence work. His security clearance level is higher than anyone else in this cabin, including mine. The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear the aircraft's engines humming in the background. Sullivan's expression had shifted from suspicion to something approaching shock. For the past 3 years, Admiral Hawthorne continued, Mr. Chen has been running intelligence operations across 4 continents while maintaining his cover as your administrative aide. The Romanian operation succeeded because he had spent 8 months developing a source inside Kozlov's organization and had detailed knowledge of the arms dealer's security arrangements. Petty Officer Thompson, the team sniper, spoke with the precision he usually reserved for discussing long-distance shots. Ma'am, are you saying Chen has been running covert intelligence operations this entire time? While we thought he was organizing our supply reports? That's exactly what I'm saying. The intelligence that has made your mission so successful over the past 3 years has largely come from sources that Mr. Chen developed and maintained. You've been operating with one of America's most valuable intelligence assets, and you've been asking him to fix coffee machines. Marcus watched Sullivan process this information, seeing the commander's analytical mind working through 3 years of interactions and reconsidering every assumption he had made. The big man's scarred hands gripped the arms of his chair as he struggled with the cognitive dissonance of learning that his unassuming aide was actually his most important asset. The Berlin operation last year, Sullivan said slowly. We had perfect intelligence about the target's security arrangements. Information that wasn't in any of our official briefings. Mr. Chen's work, Admiral Hawthorne confirmed. The weapons cache we found in Marseille. We received a tip about the location that came through unofficial channels. Also Mr. Chen's work. Rodriguez shook his head in disbelief. The terrorist financing network we dismantled in Turkey. Someone provided banking records that our official intelligence couldn't access. Mr. Chen cultivated a source in the Turkish banking system specifically for that operation. Marcus watched as his teammates began connecting dots they had never seen before. 3 years of successful missions that had seemed almost too easy, intelligence that had arrived at exactly the right times through channels they had never questioned, and warnings that had saved their lives on more than one occasion. Why? Sullivan asked finally. Why maintain the deception? Why let us treat you like someone unimportant? Marcus finished. Because being underestimated was my greatest asset. While you and your team focused on your tactical preparations, I could work without anyone paying attention to what I was really doing. Enemy agents looking for American intelligence operatives weren't searching for someone who appeared to be a file clerk. Chief Martinez looked genuinely embarrassed. All those times we asked you to make copies or organize paperwork. I was happy to help, Marcus said sincerely. It reinforced the cover story, and it gave me opportunities to overhear conversations that provided valuable context for my intelligence work. Admiral Hawthorne leaned back in her chair, studying the faces around the table. The reason I'm revealing this now is that Mr. Chen's cover has been compromised. Kozlov's organization has begun investigating how the Americans knew about their security arrangements. It's only a matter of time before they identify Mr. Chen as something other than what he appears to be. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Marcus's 3-year assignment with the team was over, and, with it, the most successful period in SEAL Team 6's operational history. What happens next? Sullivan asked. Mr. Chen will be reassigned to a position more appropriate to his actual capabilities and security clearance. You'll receive a new intelligence liaison who will work with you in a more traditional capacity. Admiral Hawthorne's expression softened slightly. I wanted you to understand what you've been losing before he disappeared back into the intelligence community. Marcus felt an unexpected pang of loss as he looked around the table at men who had been his colleagues for 3 years without ever really knowing him. Despite the misunderstandings and dismissive treatment, he had grown genuinely fond of the team and proud of their successes together. For what it's worth, he said quietly, it's been an honor working with all of you, even if you didn't know what that work actually involved. Sullivan extended his hand across the table. Mr. Chen, I owe you an apology. We all do. And, apparently, we owe you our lives several times over. As Marcus shook hands with each team member, he realized that while his time as the invisible Aide was ending, something new was beginning. The looks of respect and curiosity in their eyes suggested that his days of being overlooked and underestimated might finally be behind him. 6 months after his cover was blown in Romania, Marcus Chen found himself in an entirely different world. Gone were the days of sitting quietly in corners while others made decisions based on his intelligence. His new position as Senior Intelligence Analyst for Joint Special Operations Command came with a corner office, a staff of 12 analysts, and direct access to decision-makers at the highest levels of government. But old habits died hard, and Marcus still kept a low profile whenever possible. His reputation in the intelligence community had grown significantly since the Romanian operation, but he preferred to let his work speak for itself rather than seeking recognition. This preference for anonymity would soon be tested in the most public way imaginable. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Marcus was reviewing satellite intelligence from the South China Sea. His secretary, Janet Morrison, knocked on his office door with the expression she reserved for truly important interruptions. Mr. Chen, Admiral Hawthorne is on line 1. She says it's urgent. Marcus picked up his secure phone to find the Admiral speaking in the crisp, efficient tone that meant serious business was at hand. Marcus, we have a situation. The President is visiting Norfolk Naval Base next week for a public ceremony honoring the success of our counter-terrorism operations. SEAL Team 6 will be receiving commendations for their work over the past 3 years. The President specifically asked about the intelligence support that made those operations possible. Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. Admiral, I hope you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting. The President wants to meet the intelligence personnel responsible for the team's success. I've managed to keep the details vague for security reasons, but he's specifically requested that all key contributors be present for the ceremony. With respect, ma'am, my work is more effective when I remain anonymous. A public ceremony would compromise my ability to operate in the field. Admiral Hawthorne's chuckle carried clearly through the encrypted line. Marcus, your field days ended when Kozlov's people identified you as an intelligence operative. Your new role requires a different kind of visibility. Besides, the President doesn't often take no for an answer. The ceremony was scheduled for the following Friday, giving Marcus exactly 1 week to prepare for the kind of public exposure he had spent his career avoiding. The event would include senior military officials, members of Congress, and representatives from allied intelligence services. It was precisely the sort of high-profile gathering that would normally give him anxiety attacks. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan called personally to invite Marcus to a private meeting with the team before the ceremony. They gathered in the same briefing room where Marcus had spent 3 years being treated as furniture, but the atmosphere now was completely different. Chen, Sullivan began, using his first name for the first time in their professional relationship. I wanted to discuss Friday's ceremony with you before it becomes a media circus. The team has been debriefed about your actual role, and we understand now why our operations were so successful. Chief Martinez nodded enthusiastically. The guys have been going through our old mission reports, trying to identify all the times your intelligence made the difference. It's embarrassing how often we succeeded because of information we didn't even know you provided. Marcus appreciated their acknowledgement, but he was more concerned about the practical implications of the ceremony. I'm worried about operational security. Public recognition could limit my effectiveness in future assignments. Petty Officer Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. Actually, we've been thinking about that. What if the public recognition is exactly what makes you more effective? I'm not following. Sullivan explained their reasoning with the tactical precision that made him such an effective leader. For 3 years, you were successful because everyone underestimated you. Now that cover is blown in the intelligence community. But there's a different kind of cover we could create. Public recognition as a desk analyst, Chief Martinez continued. Someone who coordinates intelligence but doesn't gather it personally. The ceremony could establish you as an important but bureaucratic figure, not someone who runs field operations. Marcus considered the possibility. Creating a new false persona built around partial truth was actually more sophisticated than his previous complete deception. If done correctly, it could provide cover for future operations while satisfying the president's desire to recognize his contributions. It's not a bad strategy, he admitted. Though I'm still not comfortable with the public attention. Thompson, the sniper, spoke up with his characteristic dry humor. Chen, you spent 3 years letting us think you were afraid of your own shadow. I think you can handle pretending to be a nervous desk analyst for one afternoon. The week passed quickly as Marcus prepared for his new role. He worked with Admiral Hawthorne's staff to develop talking points that would satisfy public curiosity without revealing sensitive details. The challenge was presenting his work in terms that sounded impressive but not threatening to potential adversaries who might be watching. The day of the ceremony dawned clear and bright, with gentle winds off the Chesapeake Bay that carried the salt smell of the ocean across Norfolk Naval Base. The venue was the base's main auditorium, a facility that had hosted similar ceremonies for decades. But this event carried special significance because of the unprecedented success of the operations being honored. Marcus arrived early, wearing his best civilian suit and feeling more nervous than he had during actual life-threatening intelligence operations. The difference, he realized, was that in the field he could control most variables through careful planning. Public ceremonies involved too many unpredictable elements for his comfort. Admiral Hawthorne found him reviewing his notes in a quiet corner of the pre-ceremony reception area. She looked elegant in her dress uniform, with ribbons and decorations that told the story of a distinguished military career. Marcus, you look like you're preparing for a court-martial instead of a commendation ceremony. Try to relax. The president is looking forward to meeting you, and this recognition is long overdue. I just want to make sure I don't say anything that compromises operational security or future effectiveness. You'll be fine. Remember, you're playing the role of a bureaucrat who coordinates intelligence analysis. Boring, important, but not particularly glamorous or threatening. The ceremony began with traditional military precision. The base commander welcomed the distinguished guests, including the president, members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and representatives from allied nations. The auditorium was filled with military personnel, their families, and selected members of the media. When SEAL Team 6 was introduced, they marched onto the stage in perfect formation, looking every inch the elite warriors they were. Marcus watched from his seat in the audience as his former teammates received their commendations, feeling pride in their accomplishments and his hidden contribution to their success. The president's speech was eloquent and inspiring, emphasizing the importance of intelligence in modern military operations and the courage of those who served in both visible and invisible roles. When he mentioned the intelligence support that had made the operations possible, Marcus felt hundreds of eyes scanning the audience, trying to identify the mysterious analysts he was describing. Ladies and gentlemen, the President continued, military success in the modern era requires seamless coordination between operational forces and intelligence personnel. Today, we honor not just the warriors who execute our missions, but also the analysts whose insights make those missions possible. Admiral Hawthorne rose from her seat and approached the podium with an authority that commanded immediate attention. Marcus felt his nervousness spike as he realized his moment in the spotlight was approaching. Mr. President, I would like to present Senior Intelligence Analyst Marcus Chen, whose work over the past 3 years has been instrumental in the success of our counter-terrorism operations. The auditorium erupted in polite applause as Marcus made his way to the stage, acutely aware that this was the most public moment of his professional life. He had faced enemy agents, navigated international crises, and managed complex intelligence operations, but walking across a stage in front of cameras felt surreal. As he approached the President, Marcus noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Admiral Hawthorne had moved to attention and was rendering a crisp military salute. The significance of the gesture hit him immediately. A senior admiral was publicly acknowledging his contributions with the kind of respect normally reserved for the highest-ranking officials. The President followed the admiral's lead, offering his own respectful nod before extending his hand in greeting. Mr. Chen, Admiral Hawthorne has briefed me on your contributions to our national security. Your country owes you a debt of gratitude. Marcus shook the President's hand, acutely aware that cameras were capturing every moment of the interaction. Behind the President, he could see Lieutenant Commander Sullivan and his team watching with expressions that mixed pride, respect, and perhaps a touch of amazement at seeing their former file clerk receiving recognition from the highest levels of government. Thank you, Mr. President. It's been an honor to serve. The intelligence community often works in shadows, but your achievements deserve recognition. The operations we're honoring today saved lives and protected our allies. As the President pinned a civilian service medal to Marcus's jacket, the audience stood in sustained applause. Marcus caught sight of faces in the crowd, military officers who had dismissed him as unimportant, intelligence personnel who had underestimated his capabilities, and politicians who were now reassessing their understanding of how modern operations really worked. The moment that would later become iconic occurred as Marcus prepared to leave the stage. Admiral Hawthorne, rather than simply shaking his hand, rendered another crisp salute. The gesture was picked up by every camera in the auditorium, and, within hours, it would be broadcast around the world as a symbol of respect for intelligence professionals who served without recognition. More significantly, Lieutenant Commander Sullivan stepped forward from his position with the SEAL team and also saluted. The rest of the team followed suit, 8 elite warriors publicly acknowledging the contribution of someone they had once asked to fix coffee machines. The silence in the auditorium was profound as hundreds of military personnel and civilians witnessed this unprecedented display of respect. Marcus, overwhelmed by the recognition from colleagues who had truly understood the value of his work, returned the salute with the precision he had learned during his brief military training years earlier. Later that evening, at the reception following the ceremony, Marcus found himself surrounded by intelligence officials, military leaders, and political figures who wanted to congratulate him or learn more about his work. The attention was exactly what he had spent his career avoiding, but he handled it with the same careful precision he brought to his intelligence operations. Admiral Hawthorne approached him near the end of the evening, carrying 2 glasses of champagne and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose long-term planning had finally paid off. Marcus, how does it feel to be the most famous intelligence analyst in America? Terrifying, he answered honestly. But also strangely liberating. I spent so long trying to be invisible that I forgot there might be advantages to being seen. The President was impressed. He asked me to tell you that your country's intelligence services have his full support, and that professionals like you are the reason America stays ahead of its adversaries. Marcus accepted the champagne and looked around the reception room at faces that now showed respect instead of dismissal, curiosity instead of indifference. His 3-year experiment in invisibility was truly over, but something better had taken its place. Admiral, what happens next? Next, you continue serving your country, but with the recognition and resources appropriate to your contributions. Your work will still require discretion, but you'll never again have to pretend to be someone you're not. As Marcuschan stood in the Norfolk Naval Base reception hall, surrounded by the recognition he had never sought but always deserved, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him from invisible file clerk to publicly honored intelligence analyst. The Admiral's salute had changed everything, marking the moment when his true value was finally acknowledged by those who mattered most. The quiet observer had stepped out of the shadows, and America's intelligence community would never be quite the same.